Hi, this is Assistant Editor Majra Goswami with ThePrint, and I'm here with British-Palestinian author Salma Dabbagh. Is that how you pronounce your
It's
name?
fine, Selma Dabbagh. Yeah, it's fine.
Salma Dabbagh, and we are here to talk about Palestinian artists and art in amid the Gaza conflict. So, if you could start off by telling me about the situation on the ground in Gaza and how censorship on artists happen there.
Okay, well, it's. I think we've got two big questions in there. One is about the situation on the ground and how we see it, and how we're able to see it, and how we're not able to see it. We have to remember that international foreign correspondents are still not allowed into the Gaza Strip. This is completely unprecedented in history. You've never been able to have anywhere which has been so closed off from the international gaze. We have some very brave reporters, artists, journalists on the ground in Gaza who are using very innovative ways to get their voices out. And what we see, the picture, the composite picture of life in Gaza could not be more dire. We have got a strangulation of all aid, water, electricity, internet connectivity going into Gaza. So there's really a blackout. There's also starvation being used as a weapon of war against the Palestinian people of Gaza, to the extent that most people are really struggling to get their basic necessities. Most of the housing stock, most of the buildings have been destroyed, completely decimated. You've also got on top of that the fact that all of our universities in Gaza, 12 of them, have been systematically, one by one, blown up. The last one was detonated, quite carefully. So it wasn't something that they were worried that there was militants inside it, for example. They knew that it was safe enough to wire it up and then blow it up. So there's been a systematic destruction of our education and also of our cultural heritage and history. So at the time that there's production of Gazan artists, I don't think we can forget the fact that there's also been a decimation of our cultural heritage in Gaza, which includes things like completely irreplaceable mosques, which date back to the Mamluk periods, which contained archives of manuscripts like the Omari Mosque. And then also the third oldest church in the world was bombed. And when it was bombed, one of the men in that mosque was an archivist who kept photographs of a photographer called Keegan, sorry, it's a difficult name, Keegan Degilian, so an Armenian photographer who had this extraordinary collection of photographs of Gaza's history from 1948 onwards, and that was all lost with his death of the keeper of those archives. That's not to mention the libraries, the bookshops, the living culture of the camps and of the towns and of the people, which luckily has been partly preserved in the writings of Gazan writers like Ahmed Massoud and Atif Abu Saif, and poets like Heba Abu Nada and Musab Abu Toha. So we have at the moment, with in terms of where Palestinian art is now, I'm afraid when it comes to poetry, I don't think poems have ever been written which are as dark as the poetry coming out of Gaza in recent months, because you have poems which are written by young people who are just praying that they can die in one piece, that all of their body is maintained so that they can be buried with their head and their arms, and then you read after coming across these poems that actually they died hours later, probably in a state that nobody will recover their body and they will never be grieved, but their words remain hanging on like Facebook or something.
And we know about the direct attacks on, like Refat Alari, for example. So that is also happening. Like the renowned artists who are possibly being targeted.
Yes, I mean, I think that the targeted assassination of Rifat Al Aria is a case in point. His flat was attacked. It was one in the building, and he died with most of the members of his family in his apartment. And it was as a result of some tweets that he posted, which were said to be anti-Semitic, but they were kind of joking about some of the Israeli propaganda claims about the putting of babies into an oven, I think, which, later turned out to not be true, and he made a joke, which, anyway, yes, targeting of poets and artists. One of the first people to die on October the 7th or 8th in Gaza was a poet who'd gone out for a swim off the near Jabalia camp. He's referenced in Atif Abu Saif's book, which is called Don't Look Left, Diary of a Genocide, which is a book published while the genocide was still going on, and it itemizes 3 months living under the genocide of the man who was actually the Palestinian Minister of Culture, who was just visiting Gaza from Ramallah and was there with his son when the attack started. He was also swimming that morning, and
What's his name?
his name is Atif Abu Saif, and he's a very good writer. He's also written a book called The Drone Eats With Me, which has some short stories and pieces which explain. I don't think when you talk to people who are in Gaza, or you hear, you might have heard this on social media, the drones are there all the time in the background. People can't sleep. So not only are people injured and starving and thirsty and living in contaminated circumstances and without houses, they're being sleep deprived, which is a form, it's sensory deprivation, it's a form of torture. And some of these drones and other weaponry is now being augmented to be used in a way that is like quadcopters, which are taking out people. It's programmed by AI. This is dystopic horror film. This is the worst. I don't think the world's ever seen anything like this. The footage of what's coming out of Gaza, mainly conveyed to us by kids. Like Bassam, Wizard Bassam. You must have seen her stuff. I mean, this woman. It's like, as I've been covering Gaza, more and more journalists have left, and this young woman is staying there, reporting tirelessly. And I think, in a way, there should be a lot of shame for not being more insistence by governments and by press lobby groups to just say, we can't leave this poor girl on her own. We need to get in there and help at least cover this situation, even if we can't stop it.
What do you think about all this graffiti and all this street art that's coming up amid the conflict, and how it might influence or inspire people outside, or make them pay attention to this conflict?
Yeah, I think there's been some fantastic examples. I don't know whether you've seen like some of the tents which have been created using cartons and very colourful and playful. And then also there's one young social media personality who I think is around 10 or 11, she just broadcasts her recipes. She does little cooking videos.
I know who you are talking about. Yeah.
And she's always smiling and she's always upbeat and she speaks so delicately. She says, I don't want to complain, but we have got a little bits of skin infection here which I can't get rid of. And then she'll, and they're really these characters, and as reflected through their art and their creativity and their resilience, I think are inspiring people all around the world, and we may have been losing. I think the Palestinians for a long time have lost in terms of the war on images, because that's been very much controlled. And I'm not saying this as a conspiracy theorist. There is a book called Israel and Hollywood, which looks at the influence, and this isn't written by somebody necessarily particularly critical of Israel, but it's just looking at how Hollywood has worked with Israel to promote its image and to downgrade, as a natural result of that, the image of Arabs, Muslims and Palestinians, particularly Palestinians. You rarely see us in a film where we're not either the normal tropes, a terrorist or victim at best, normally terrorist. And there's this idea that of all the people in the world, we have this insane desire for violence and vengeance above everything else. None of us want to have like jobs and homes and families and just do the usual stuff. We're like propelled by a sort of another malevolent force. That's the way that stereotyping works. But I think with what's been happening since, it started, I think, in 21 with the Unity Intifada, when there were the land confiscation and house confiscation by Jewish settlers in East Jerusalem, that you've got these young journalists speaking on social media so eloquently, so powerfully, and the power comes from knowing that they are right and that their cause is just. And I think that conveys and that inspires people in a way that the Israeli propaganda spokespeople just can't do. It's just we're not buying it, you know. So you've got this youthful vibe of like, come what may, you will not take our dignity from us. However crushed we are, we will continue to be respectful and innovative, and to try to get your attention and to get this to stop in some way. But even as I say that, I feel like it's kind of like you feel so disempowered, because you feel like nothing, there's been a groundswell of support, but it's really in areas where there isn't the power to make this stop. But I feel that people's sympathies are with us more than ever.
We were talking about young artists. Tell me a little bit about like more experienced artists like you or Susan Abul Hawa, who has been also doing a lot of work on promoting the Palestinian cause in other forums, and tell us how effective that has been, or like there has been a lot of censorship. How does
Yes.
it play out?
Yeah, there's been a huge amount of censorship. I think one thing I would direct anyone who's listening to this to watch of Susan Howard is the Oxford Union debate that she participated in.
Yeah,
And she
I
was a
heard that.
force of nature. And it is very scary doing these things. It can be. I think, a lot of Palestinians working in the sector, or as artists, as writers, we really had to kind of train ourselves, get up to speed, get used to dealing with the camera, articulating, and often facing very, very hostile audiences. Our voices are often censored out of the picture. We are often particularly in the beginning, the main question was like to condemn Hamas all the time. So you immediately get put onto this back footing and like trying to, whereas our history, Palestinian history, goes back, for centuries on the land, and of the tragedy of our continuing ethnic cleansing against us started in 48 in earnest and has been continuing since then. So the role of artists has been really instrumental and important. I think also some of the artist lobbying groups, if you've seen some of the debates around Pen in America and what happened there, and how they've had to, there's been a change, a transformation of that freedom of expression organization, which was trying to hold to a pro-Israel line at some levels, but was so. What happened with that organization, Pen America, is that they had a prize that they normally give to artists, but because they had not called for a ceasefire as the local group, not Penn International called for a ceasefire. Pen America didn't call for one. So when they were going to give a literary prize, a lot of the writers on the shortlist said, "We're not accepting this prize. We're not accepting anything from an organization that doesn't call for a ceasefire, at least." And so, because of that, the Stein Foundation did not give the prize that year, but instead donated the money to a Palestinian charity. So I think that's a very good example as to how people can take action to change institutions. And that internal campaigning is something that we really have to think about being more effective about on an individual level, not just when it comes to Palestine, but like politics in general, because I think we're entering into a very worrying era, particularly with Trump's election.
Where does it go from here?
Where does it go from here?
Especially in context of Gaza, and a little bit on the rebuilding of Gaza. How do you think it will pan out?
Okay. Well, I do not want Jared Kushner and Donald Trump rebuilding Gaza with an expulsion, a population transfer of Palestinians from their homes and their lands. I think it is utterly contemptible and outrageous that they can even think such a thing. These are people who have lived on that land for centuries, have a culture closely connected to that land, to that climate, to that terrain, to its food, to its trees, to its, and you can see this reflected very heavily in the literature, the films, and the poetry that comes from Gaza. That's unconscionable. That's an absolute red line. No population transfer out of Gaza. And then the question is, we're dealing with a site of rubble, and to move that rubble out could take, I don't know, every estimate I read, it jumps. At one point they said 3 years, and then it's sort of gone up since then. So to just even move the rubble out will take time. But anything is possible. Europe was destroyed. You just have to get the political will, the finance, and the motivation to build it. And like Gideon Levy, you've interviewed Gideon Levy. The only way that Israel can live peaceably in the region is to make friends with the people that surround it. And that includes the Palestinians. We cannot be treated as an irritant. We are an integral part of the land, and we are also very much part of the fiber of the culture of the region. And so even if you feel that even if one can believe that we can be politically, there can be a capitulation of our political leadership, the literature and the culture and the art and the film is transmitting far broader than that and is having far more of an impact. So I hope that transmits somehow. That's the problematic area. How do you get that to transmit into political power? And we need the global south with us. We really do. And I think with the ICJ ruling in South Africa stepping up, it was a moment. It was almost like a sort of Bandung moment where you think possibly we can realign over this. We look very much to India for Gandhi and for nonviolent resistance. We have for a long time, had a lot of nonviolent resistance both in Gaza and the West Bank. A lot of it has been facing like severe violence in response. But like as Arundhati Roy said in her Pen Pinter Prize, we could not have used the nonviolent resistance more creatively or for longer.
Do you see parallels of Palestine and Kashmir, or do you think these are separate issues and should be dealt separately?
Um, I think there are definite parallels in terms, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert on Kashmir. And I'd firstly like to preface this by saying I'm always very grateful for the support that we always get from Kashmiri activists. In terms of a military operation and a separation of people from the same place, there are a lot of parallels. Yes.
What are you currently working on? Give us an
Oh, thank you
idea.
for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm working on a novel set in 1938, Jerusalem. It's set around a party in an affluent household. The idea is it's a little bit like Mrs. Dalloway, that everything sort of, that's where the movement of the book is going. And what I'd like to show is play with the idea was there a moment in history which, if certain people had acted with greater integrity and courage, the course of history could have gone differently, that we could have got something closer to a binational state. There were conversations going on between Palestinian and Jewish intellectuals which did not preface the creation of a greater Jewish like the possibility of having a state, whatever it's called, Palestine, Israel, or a hybrid or whatever. It wasn't prefaced on the supremacy of one group over the other. This apartheid state that we're living with now. It was the idea of a binational state, and it's a little bit of a love story, a little bit of a coming age. It's told through the eyes of the daughter in the household, who's about 15.
So it's an alternative history story, or more like a personal drama?
It's a personal drama. It's a personal drama with a big political backdrop.
Right.
But I think what's very useful as a writer to describe a complicated political setting is if you look at it through the eyes of a child, or somebody younger, because then they're trying to make sense of it themselves. So you can diffuse the complexity for them. Diffuse it, diffuse it, like, simplify it, and explain it out to the reader in a way that doesn't seem kind of clunky or overbearing, or like an information dump. Like, this is what the British are doing now, and this is what the. But yeah, it was a point in time in Palestine which was where there were a lot of extraordinary individuals at work, and it was living there, and I think that the Palestinian upper middle class life has isn't as present in our literature, for good reason, because we were a revolutionary movement for a long time, and it was felt that our focus needed to be with those who, the Palestinians who are living in the camps. There are still about 6 million Palestinians living in refugee camps, some for the fourth, fifth generation now. There are 52 of these camps. And that was felt like that should be our touch point of concern, not the elite. And the elite are quite criticised for being a little too close to the British during that critical period. So but I still think that for me, as somebody who's mainly an English language reader, it's an easier world to access. These sort of hybrid worlds where they were speaking mainly English and a bit of French and bits of Arabic. It's more familiar to me as a backdrop. It's based on a real story, so yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
this
you.
conversation.